3, 2, 1. Going. Thank you. Rolling this time. Morena Tato. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this morning's briefing of Kaipara District Council here today on the 2nd of March 2022. For today's council briefing, remember this is not a decision-making gathering of the council, this is a briefing. For today's briefing, we have the apologies of Councillor Joyce Paki, the apologies of Councillor Wills, and also an apology for lateness from Councillor Larson, who will be joining this gathering later. So at this point, I'm going to open this morning's briefing with a karakia. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapu pounamu te moana, hei hoa rahi ma tātou I te rangi nei, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. So for absolute clarity here, we have today myself, we have Deputy Mayor Anna Curnow, we have, yes, the Brady Bunch waves, these would be good. We have Councillor Victoria de Olivares Woodcock, we have Councillor Erin Wilson Collins, we have Councillor Mark Vincent, and we have Councillor Peter Withy. And we also have on the screen, you can see today, our Chief Executive, Louise Miller, is here, as well as the full team of General Managers of Kaipara District Council who are in the background here. And so we're all here and ready to get going. So our first item for today is the Northland Civil Defence Emergency Management staff introduction that's going to be provided to us by Laura Exton. So Laura, if you please turn on your camera. Thank you. We also have Graham McDonald, the controller of Northland Civil Defence, is in the background as well. But Laura, good morena.
Morena, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, the purpose of me being here today is to introduce myself. So I'll just begin with an introduction. Kia ora mai tātou katoa, ko Laura Exton toku ingoa, no Putururu o Kutupuna, no Tauranga Moana aho, kei te nohu o ki One Tree Point. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings to all present today. Laura Exton is my name. My ancestors are from Putururu, down in the Waikato, and I am from Tauranga. I currently reside in One Tree Point in the beautiful Bream Bay. So greetings, greetings, greetings to you all. Thank you for having me and thank you for your time today. So as I said earlier, introducing myself as the new emergency management specialist for the Kaipara. I know some or all of you would have worked with my predecessor, Demi Exley, in the past. So I began my role in end of January. Just a quick summary of my role. I'm under Darlene Lang, who is the emergency management portfolio manager for Kaipara District Council, and I'm also under Graham McDonald, who's the emergency manager for Northland Civil Defence Emergency Management Team, based in Northland Regional Council offices in Whangarei. So my role essentially is to assist Kaipara District Council with fulfilling its responsibilities under the Civil Defence Emergency Management Act. So that's ensuring that there is emergency reduction, readiness, response, and recovery. So it kind of goes in, there's a lot of different aspects involved, but the two kind of main prongs are ensuring community resilience. So working with the communities to make sure that they are ready for a response and that they have a community response plan that's tailored towards them and their hazards and their skills and their needs, and also building up the capability and capacity of our emergency operations centre staff at KDC. So that's ensuring that they are SIMS trained and skilled and ready to respond in an emergency. So that's if a local emergency becomes too great to be handled by the community themselves and they need extra support, that's where the emergency operations centre staff would step in to provide that support, whatever is needed at the time. So what I have been doing in my month and a bit of the role is focusing on connecting with people, connecting with the kaipara communities, and introducing myself and hearing from them about where they're at on their emergency response and readiness journey. Some of them are quite well established and have strong groups and plans already, and some haven't been interacted with before. So just figuring out the best way to connect with them. I've also been connecting with emergency services that are active in the kaipara as well, so forming that network to respond quickly and easily in an emergency. And I'm sure you're all aware about the Waikato Fire that occurred a couple of weeks ago as well. So my role there was representing Kaipara District Council as well as Civil Defence to provide support and advice where needed. It was a FENS-led response, so Civil Defence's role wasn't as large as perhaps the Kaimomo fire required. So our duty officer, who was on call at the time, assisted with the evacuation of the residents and worked with Darlene Lang to get the Aranga school opened up just in case the residents wanted an evacuation point, an assembly point. This wasn't needed in the end, as the community were quite resilient within themselves, and they went to their whānau in Dargaville or up in the Waipoa Forest campground. But my role since then has been supporting the community where needed, and assisting them through the welfare as well. And we had a hui with the community alongside FENS on Saturday online to discuss, to kind of debrief the fire, how it went for them, what could be improved in the future, and it really highlighted the importance of having a community response plan. So moving forward, I will be working with that community on developing a community response plan and a marae preparedness plan that is tailored to them and their kind of unique location and hazards. And it's been, I think, very positive thing that has come out of this event is that those relationships have been built with a community that we hadn't really worked with in the past. So that is something that will be ongoing for me in the next few months. So yeah, looking forward, continuing to connect with communities, working with the Waikato community, and building the capability and capacity of our Emergency Operations Centre staff. I also just wanted to take this opportunity to just quickly touch on Civil Defence's role in the COVID-19 response, because I know there are a lot of different information and thoughts out there. So we have kind of more of just a support and monitor role in this response. The lead agency is the Ministry of Health, and the lead agency for Te Tai Tokerau is the Northland DHB. So they are leading the response, and the Ministry of Social Development are leading the welfare response. There's also been significant funding provided to Māori and Pacific health providers and iwi groups for their care and community plan, and there are 4 kaupapa Māori hubs set up within Northland. So Civil Defence don't have a mandate or the funding as such in this response, so we are taking a support and advice role where needed and where requested, and our focus at the moment is on concurrent event planning and response, and like I said, providing advice and support if required. So that's all from me. I'm not sure if anyone has any questions through the chair that they want to ask at the moment. Happy to take them.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you. So elected members, are there any questions for Laura as we're introducing her today, and she's introducing herself regarding her connections with kaipara today? Yeah. So I have a question. It's wrapped up in a statement, really, Laura. We've had a long time with changing, if you like, and some uncertainty regarding some of our civil defence team for working for kaipara here, and we're really looking forward to kind of a consistent approach, really, to what's being provided for the people of Kaipara as we go forward. So one of my questions to you here is how frequently do you think you'll be exploring back corners of Kaipara district in peacetime, if you like, so that you're really familiar with the place when there's a trouble that occurs?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, it's a little more difficult at the moment with guidelines to work from home and online, but I think it's really important to know Kaipara in and out. So if a response does happen, I know where it is and who is there. Obviously, it does take time to build connections with people, and I want to be very, I guess, not tactful, but and wary, but cautious of my approach to some communities. I don't want to go in guns blazing and telling them that they need to have a community response plan where that might not be what works for them or might not be the right approach for them. So I'll be taking things a little slowly, but obviously the Waikato Fire the other week has created a bit more urgency with me about how important it is to connect with these communities. And so, yeah, it's definitely front of mind for me to connect with the communities that aren't currently connected, but I will be taking a more cautious approach to make sure the relationship was built in the right way.
Thank you. Thank you. So I would say that you have a really great situation with the elected members of this council who span right across Kaipara district. And they're a great resource for you because one of the strengths of the Kaipara district council laws as against the Whangarei district council laws is that Kaipara district council laws represent about 2,600 people each. So they're much closer to the ground than your Whangarei district councillors who represent about 8,000 people each. Yeah. So the people that you see on this screen today intimately know their communities, and they need to be very integrated into whatever your kind of access and accessibility plans for you connecting with our community would be, because the bunch of these people know this place better than anyone else, which is why these people are councillors. And so these elected members are your portal to accessing the rest of the people of the place, alongside our key iwi groups here in Kaipara. Yeah, but like I say, your elected members here represent just over 2,500 people each. Yeah, so that they're really close to the community. Yeah, which like I say, you don't get in other parts of the region. Yeah, and you probably wouldn't get in Tauranga either. Yeah, so yeah, elected members, are there any other comments or questions at this point? No, look, no further questions. Look, so thank you, Laura. Thanks for joining us today. Thank you for your presentation. Looking forward to catching up with you, like I say, in peacetime rather than in troubled times. But it's great to know that you're here and on the job and a key part of the team for us all as we're all keeping our community safe. So thank you for that, and thank you for your work, and thanks for your presentation today. So
cool. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Good luck with the rest of your day. Thank you, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Right. Moving on to our second item with our briefing today. This is an item which is coming in new and coming in fast. And those of you who've read the New Zealand Herald today, or the Advocate, this item is a news story today and has only just been revealed to us in the last few days, which is regarding the Northland Renewable Energy Zone. So, like I say, it's very topical and it's absolutely in the news today. So for us and for this presentation today, we have Russell Shaw from Top Energy and Andrew McLeod from North Power, the CEOs of both of our two big power companies here north of Auckland. And so welcome both of you. So for those, yes, who aren't familiar, Russell is in the black t-shirt and Andrew's in the blue jacket. Yeah. So thank you for joining us today. And I'll hand over to you, gentlemen, to introduce this presentation. Thank you.
Kia ora, Jason. I appreciate that. And kia ora to elected members. And to Louise, we work quite closely with the KDC management team, so we know each other quite well. So it's really, we're grateful to have spent some time with you and frame this idea of renewable energy zones. Just before we get into it, I thought it's worthwhile introducing with a bit more detail Russ and myself, and we'll also introduce Philippa, who's helping us with the whole consultation process, mainly because I think it's useful for the companies who stand behind this proposal to if you get a sense for that. So Russell, do you perhaps want to kick off with that in terms of Top Energy and what you're running up there in the north?
Sure. So I'm Chief Executive at Top Energy. I've been here for about 13 years now. We service 33,000 consumers in the far north. We're owned by those consumers. We take that as that's a very strong responsibility, that we not only want to deliver them electricity, but deliver them the best value that we can from electricity. Top Energy's got the lines network that services those customers, contracting business of about 100 staff, and a generation business, well, about 60 megawatts now, but that's valued about 400 million compared to the network business, which is valued about 300 million.
Thanks, Russell. And I'm Andrew McLeod. I'm the Chief Executive at North Power. Your lights all appear to be on, so hopefully we're doing a good job. We do run the power networks across Whangarei and the Kaipara, down to about Kaiwaka, so just south of Kaiwaka and just a little north of where I am now, which is Whangarei. We also have the high-speed fibre networks in the region, so across the towns and the city. And we run a reasonably sophisticated construction business these days with about 1,000 people across the North Island building power networks. So kind of a broad set of expertise across networks and building networks. So that's sort of the capability we bring. I'll just introduce Philippa as well, because Philippa is helping us manage the consultation process around the renewable energy zone. Philippa, do you just want to jump on and say hello?
Hello, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity for allowing us to speak with you today. So I have a background in communications and engagement, and I've worked with Top Energy now for a number of years and within the energy sector for a lot longer than that. So this is a great engagement to be a part of, and we're very keen to get feedback and submissions from the Northland community because it's a very good opportunity long term.
Thanks, Philippa. I'll just quickly frame what this renewable energy zone concept is, because that I think it's just useful to have a bit of a mental map of it. And then Russell will spend a little bit of time talking about renewable energy up here in the north and what it could look like long term, because we find it's easier to talk practical sometimes. You know, if we're talking solar farms, how big are they? Where might they be? If we're talking wind, what specifically you're talking about. So we'll go through that process. Starting with the concept, renewable energy zones are just an idea at the moment, so they don't exist yet. There are examples of them overseas, in Australia in particular. And renewable energy zones are really just a circle on a map where governments really and grid operators say, right, we feel that's where renewables should be focused on, enabled, and made possible. So the idea is to create a zone where you say, great, this is where the renewables go. We have in the north a lot of interest at the moment in renewable energy. So between Russell and I, we have around 2 gigawatts of applications. So that's people saying, hey, we think we might want to build a generation plant, wind or solar, in your area. Can we talk? It doesn't mean they'll all be built, but it gives you a sense of the scale. And just to size that, we use about 200 megawatts up here in the north, between my network and Russell's network. So you're looking at 10 times the generating capacity of what we actually use here. So if you could make all that possible, we'd become a net exporter of energy down towards Auckland. We do believe the price of electricity would be managed and a bit more sustainable long term if we have generation here. And it becomes just another, I guess, string in our bow in terms of a region, in terms of the things we do produce and our contribution to decarbonisation long term. So Russell and I think supporting renewables is the right thing to do, and we think that these renewable energy zones are likely to be a very positive thing for Northland if we can get them to go. Picking where to go next. Just the shape of the consultation. So this is a Transpower consultation. So the national grid operator are running this consultation around renewable energy zones, and they're really just trying to work out whether it's a good idea. We know them quite well. They do think it's a good idea, and they do have a belief that Northland is the obvious place to start with them. So there's certainly an inclination, but they're also a government-managed organisation who has to go all through the steps of consultation and doing the homework and checking it works. So this stage of consultation is a broad outreach discussion on this is the idea. Do you think it's a good idea? We're keen for the North to turn up quite strongly during that consultation process because we are at the top of the queue at the moment. So Transpower, assuming they go ahead with this, are saying, great, let's do the pilot in the North. Let's try and prove this concept in the North. And we believe that if we can all turn up as a united set of stakeholders here, they're more than likely to press the go button and say, great, looks like both a great resource and it looks like a great set of councils and businesses and iwi groups that are all broadly aligned with this. So it looks like a good place to try this out, which is where we're heading to. We'll talk a little bit more at the end on the consultation, but before I go too far into the nuances of energy market policy and process, perhaps we'll get Russell just to build a bit of a picture of how this renewable energy resource could look like as it builds out and when it would build up. Can I pass over to you, Russell?
Thanks, Andrew. I just wanted to give you, as Andrew said, a bit of a picture of what we've got up here at the moment and what the potential is and where that sort of potential exists. So at the moment, if you look at renewable energy, we've got about 60 megawatts across Northland. That's all at the moment. And most of that's located at NAFA, about 55 megawatts through the geothermal plant that we've got there. The latest one was commissioned at the end of 2020. And it makes the far north pretty much self-sufficient for energy. So we export about 97% of the time. And through doing that, we've managed to bring down wholesale prices by about 10% and introduced competition into the region where competition never existed before. So we've had some real benefits from having that local generation and not relying on it coming up from the Waikato through Auckland, having to pay the large transmission prices associated with it. But the geothermal's about done. We've got space for about another 32 megawatts there, which will take us up to just under 100 megawatts at NAFA, and that's a long-term sustainable level. It's about 100 megawatts in total from geothermal. When you start then to look at solar, and a megawatt of solar takes between 1 and 1.5 hectares of land. And a sort of sweet spot for these solar farms is about 20 megawatts at the moment. So you're looking at about 30 hectares of land at the top end. They're very, very susceptible to being close to capacity on the network and having cheap land available. So the farms that have got away and have started tend to be around areas which are relatively cheap land and that line capacity is there. So we've seen quite a lot in the far north. We've got about 90 megawatts around Kaitaia, up as far as Pukenui, where we do have line capacity and the land is relatively cheap. So that's across 3 solar farms, that 90 megawatts. In total, across the far north, we've had 325 megawatts of applications for solar. We've had a similar amount come in around Bream Bay, so 316 megawatts, and Dargville, an application for a 60 megawatt solar farm out there. So when you look at the total capacity we've got on the lines out of the region at the moment, it's only about 600 megawatts, and you can see we very quickly fill that capacity. So this project, the renewable energy zones, is really about saying how do we create more capacity and who's going to pay for that. And I read your comment, Mayor, in the paper today around upgrading of lines. Well, really it should be the user that pays, and the problem we've got with the pricing principles at the moment is it's the first person to connect pays the total cost of the lines. And this programme is essentially saying, well, let's group those generators together and allow them to bid for capacity on the lines. And when we fill the capacity through interest, then we build the line. So it takes away that first mover disadvantage, because really what's happening is people are coming in, they're using the spare capacity that's there, and once that capacity is used, there's no more. And if you take my network, we've got no more capacity south from Kaitaia, it's full, and we've got no more capacity south from Kaikoui. So we're finished. We're close to renewable generation now. And that's why we think we really need to make this change. The last one I wanted to pick off was wind, and to give you an idea of wind. So at the moment, we've got about 690 megawatts of wind in total across New Zealand. The largest of those wind farms is Westwind, just outside of Wellington, and it's 143 megawatts. Now, we're dealing with applications right up the west coast, but we've got 2 wind farms at over 300 megawatts. So that's more than double the size of the largest that we have already. So the potential that we have is absolutely enormous for Northland. We think that this takes away a relatively simple regulatory constraint, the concept of a renewable energy zone, and through that will open up more jobs, high-tech jobs through construction and through operation of these assets. It's absolutely critical that as we move to decarbonisation, that we're going to need more generation. We're going to double our generation consumption by 2050 as we move to electric vehicles and we decarbonise our process industries. We've got to get that power from somewhere. And it seems to me that it makes a huge amount of sense for us to have generation close to demand. And if we can then get a benefit from selling that generation to the consumers in Auckland as Auckland continues to grow, then it's a real benefit for Northland. So that hopefully gives you a bit of a picture of what the problem is and where the opportunity exists and what sort of generation we're talking about here.
Thanks, Russell. I might just pick it up and come back to consultation, but I think the point Russell made around who pays is important. And both Top Energy and ourselves are community owned. So we're community owned organisations. So we want the best for our consumer owners, which are the same as your stakeholders. So the idea here is to make the generators pay, but do it in a way that you can make it as a subscription basis. So if you've got a 20 megawatt solar farm, you can pay a kind of a per megawatt charge rather than having to build a whole new line yourself. So you sort of cut the cost up between everyone. It's sort of as simple as that. And that's where we're trying to get to. In terms of consultation, we've spoken to Louise, we've spoken to other CEOs of the other councils. So they have an understanding of the concept, and we're talking to them about how they may submit in their own right. But we wanted to make ourselves available. This is where Russell and I and Philippa are trying to provide, I guess, a platform for people to discuss honestly. Is this good for us? What are the downsides? And just have someone that can talk to you locally who is local and not pushing a barrow, so that we can get the right understanding, and ultimately we hope a nice combined set of submissions. So we might stop talking then. The consultation process runs from now through to 8th of April, so it's about a month. The consultation pieces don't have to be long and extensive. They really are, I guess, positions from people. So, general positions of support, things that Transpower may need to or should consider, such as land use, if that's an interest of people. But we don't have to have all the answers. We just need to frame generally, do we support it, and generally, what are the next steps in the process that should be considered. So I'll stop there and just open to questions.
We'll go to Councillor Wilson-Collins, then Councillor Vincent. Thank you. I have a question as well. Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Russell, Andrew, and Philippa. That's really, really interesting stuff. But to be honest, I don't know if I've completely followed everything. So I do have a few questions, if that's okay. So the first thing I just wanted to understand, this renewable energy zone, you say it's a circle on a map. Do you mean in that circle on the map is where you would build the infrastructure, the actual renewable energy infrastructure, so the solar farms and the
That's
wind
right.
farms?
Maybe I'll just frame it high level, Russell, you can do the detail. Like it's a big circle. So the circle would be the north. So it's not saying the solar farm would go in this paddock. It's just saying like up here in the north is a great place to deal with renewables. And really inside that circle is where you have these special rules, commercial rules really, for how you can connect to the distribution and transmission networks and what you pay. Is sort of where we're getting to.
Right.
And I think it's really clear what it's not. And it's not a green light for generation to be built without going through the normal consenting processes. So this is purely focused on how do we pay for the transmission upgrades that are required. So generators still have to go through consenting, still have to engage with iwi, still have to do all the things that you would normally expect from a generation development. It's just how do we group the costs of the transmission connections across a number of generators.
Right. Okay, that clears that up. So then you talk about the consultation that's happening right now. How exactly do we access that and get involved?
Do you want to pick that one up, Philippa? And then we'll.
Yep. No, I'll come in there, and also look, I'll turn on my video so that you actually know who you're talking to. So this is a Transpower-led video. So the consultation. So the feedback does need to be fed back to them through their website. We're really happy to help in terms of preparing submissions, and that they can then be submitted through to Transpower. In the information that has been sent around, and if you haven't received it, I can send it again after this meeting. It provides those links, and if you were able to share that information with your contacts, with your stakeholders, and as broadly as possible, that would be very useful. We're also running a public webinar on the 31st of March where people can come in, and it will be high level because, as you found, this information is quite technical. It's quite hard to digest it down into easy to understand messages, and we have produced a video to assist with that. But we're happy to help run workshops and webinars to assist in providing information to prepare those submissions.
Awesome, thank you, Philippa. I don't think I've seen anything, so
Sorry, yes, yes, just coming in there. Thank you, Philippa. Councillor Wilson-Collins. It's at the end of the presentation files that were attached to this agenda.
Brilliant.
Is a link to all of that, and perhaps Tracy, I don't know if you could pull up that information onto the screen, but people are advised to go to www.transpower.co.nz/REZ.
And if I could perhaps just add, consultations in two parts. The first part is, should we have renewable energy zones in New Zealand? And then the second part is, should we pilot this in Northland? And we've managed to position us at the front of the queue for Northland to be that pilot zone. So that's what we're really looking for from support across the region to say, yep, we're open, we want this, let's pilot it across Northland.
Just to add one point as well. Assuming this concept people support, so it's sort of start as an assumption. What would be great out of the consultation process is sort of a flood of support. So just broad-based, whoever's got an interest, sending a short note to Transpower and flooding their inbox with yes please, and it should be in the north. And then we'll try and pull together some, I guess, high impact joint submissions. So we've been talking to Louise and the other councils about potentially a collective submission, if that's of interest to you. Obviously that'll come through your through your own meetings. Russell and I will be talking to business and saying, should we do a collective business submission? We'd love to get iwi involved and have something that's a cohesive voice for iwi. So we'll be trying to we call it sort of quarterbacking, but we're trying to group people into areas which might be useful to have a collective voice, but not restrict people's individual voice, because I think the more people are put a view in, the better for the consultation process.
Thank you. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, in terms of the reception that I was experiencing just then, I guess I had another reason to add to my questions, which was is there any prospect of taking that same concept as you're proposing to aid a sort of coordinated approach in the spread of high-speed broadband across?
Thank
the
you, Councillor
region?
Vincent. That's outside the subject of this briefing. That's a bit, yeah, outside the
That wasn't-
subject of the briefing. But anyway, you'll be
I
able
got
to
that
take
in
that
there,
up
yep.
with Andrew separately. But please, back
Yes,
to
yeah,
the
okay.
issue
No,
of the
the,
electric. Thank you.
It's more of an operational question, I guess, in a way, and there's perhaps a clue in one of the photos in the presentation. I was like, there is potential visual pollution from solar panel arrays. Is it possible to arrange things so that, say, the land can still be farmed as the first thing? And if it can, then does it mean that rather than the viability of this thing depending on the price of land, it's the capacity to maybe lease the land and still continue farming operations with it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
good
happy to
question.
speak to that.
Go for it.
So if you take the Lodestone development that's happening just north of Kaitaia, that's exactly what they're proposing. So they're leasing the land and it will still be used for farming. So they'll put raised arrays in, so they'll be sort of 6 to 8 foot above the ground, so you can still have grazing below it. It does have an impact on the utilisation you get from the solar arrays. You don't get quite as much power out of them. The latest arrays that are going in are double-sided, and they work best where you've actually put stone on the ground, so you get some solar reflection back and you can generate on both sides of the panels. But it's still economic to do it different ways, and these guys have selected to, as I say, to raise them off the ground and allow grazing beneath them.
Yeah, they're quite flexible. A couple of other points I might just add to that. I think Russell's point earlier that renewable energy zones don't overrule or weaken any of the Resource Management Act processes or your own council processes. They're complementary. They really are about getting access to transmission. The other thing I'd just say, it's, Russell and I are engineers, so we're constantly trying to build a picture of how big is this thing, what does it look like? And very round numbers, if we took 1 gigawatt of solar and wind, and we're talking 2 gigawatts, but just everything's round numbers in my mind, that's about 10 average sized dairy farms of actual generating plants. So they're big plants. As Russell said, these are bigger than anything that exists yet. Wind's twice as big as the biggest wind farm. Solar really hasn't been built out in New Zealand yet. But the overall impact on the north, it's not as if we cover everything in solar panels. These are quite targeted plants that turn up likely near big lines, and for wind likely on the west coast. So we think they blend in, but obviously there are land use and visual impacts that need to be worked through in the detail.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Curnow, then Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, then Councillor Wethy. Thank you.
Kia ora, yes, thank you. Yeah, I mean, very exciting idea. I'm just checking sort of from a commercial point of view, this would mean that anyone who wanted to generate renewable energy and feed it into the grid, they would have to be part of this subscription model. Is that right? Is that that's correct?
Certainly, it would apply to the large generators. It wouldn't have any impact if you wanted to put domestic solar on, for example.
Okay, all right. And if you wanted to do domestic solar, that because some people like to feed their surplus domestic solar back into the grid, how would that work?
Just in exactly the same way as it does now. It wouldn't be impacted by this at all. If you take the far north, we've got the largest penetration of domestic solar in New Zealand, partly because it's beautiful weather up here. But there's no additional charge for consumers to access the network and export power.
Right. Okay. So there's no impact on the small fry who do their own creative thing. Yeah.
No, just the bigger players.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock.
Thank you for this presentation. My question is just to clarify my understanding of what the energy zone represents. And so is it for a time-bound conduit for the aggregation of generator applications to come together, committing to the shared cost rather to avoid the first mover burden? And so is it kind of like it will be a chronologically determined thing, because we'd need to have that aggregation and the large generators declaring an interest, and so it's a kind of a moving process. Am I right?
It's absolutely spot on.
It's a nice articulation. We think this probably gets done in stages. So I think in the presentation we provided, certainly in some of the more detailed material, we start to break out where the lines are constrained and where the upgrades would be. And typically we'd look at zones within zones. So looking at who was interested, say over, let's say Dargaville, for instance, what the cost to upgrade the lines from Dargaville across here to Whangarei would be, and then look at a subscription basis for that stage of the renewable energy zone. And then there might be other stages that are further north with slightly different timing. And the idea would be you just try and build forward. So for every investment, you have a set of subscriptions, and you just logically unpick who's willing to pay the costs and then build the infrastructure as you go. Russell, you've got a great view of what gets built first. It might be worth talking to that a little bit.
Yeah, so we're actually in a very good position to start with, because we've got about 600 megawatts that we can get out from the sort of Bream Bay area, because historically we had a peaking generator that was out on the coast there, and that's been some time ago dismantled and shipped off to China. But we've got a good pipeline south, but we don't have the ability to connect through to that pipeline. So as I said, we're constrained south from Kaitaia. We have constraints on the network from Kaikoui down into the grid in North Powers region, and also constrained out on the line out to Dargaville. So those are some of the areas that would be picked up first of all. There are things that we can do that are relatively simple, like protection upgrades. And then the next stage of that is actually saying, well, on that line route, we could put larger conductors, so replace the conductors so that there's more capacity. And then the third stage, and by far the most expensive stage, is actually building brand new lines, so doubling up on the capacity that you've got. But it's a huge potential that we have across Northland. It's absolutely astounding just how much we could have, but we don't have the ability to get the power out, and that's really what we're trying to solve here.
The quite positive thing from the engineering, because both our teams have been looking at this with Transpower, is a lot of it can be released by line upgrades. So you're not looking at, it's not like the Waikato 220 upgrade where you're putting huge ugly pylons up everywhere. A lot of this is very targeted on corridors that already exist, just upgrading probably the size of structures, but it's not a big change visually, which is quite important because, well, we love power lines because we're in the business, but most people don't like them. So we like to try and make them low impact.
Thank you, Councillor Weddy.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I guess just my comment would be, firstly, it seems that the major advantage you're seeking to get out of these zones is in the transmission area and getting into the market. Already, obviously, throughout New Zealand, renewable energy from a commercial point of view is being successfully implemented, and we're seeing that both up in Northland at present, and Top Energy is a prime example, and obviously the wind farm that's getting through the consenting process on the west coast of Dargaville is another one that's is obviously going ahead. But what interests me is if you get a zone together, aside from the transmission issue, are you going to have the opportunity to have some concessions in some of the somewhat restrictive parts of the RMA and other legislative hurdles you're going to have to jump when you start putting in capacity? Because that would seem to me like many countries have different special sets of requirements under different planning regimes for industrial parks. So is this some of the things that you'd be looking to in a renewable energy zone, to have a set of conditions that may make it because of the area and because of the benefit to the, not only to the immediate community, but to the nation at large, it justifies making some concessions under the current legislation. Is that something that would be worked through in the fullness of time?
It's an important question. Do you want to have first shot, Russell, and maybe I'll.
So it's not part of this proposal, and many of those powers already exist. So if you take, for example, the power that comes out of Manapuri Power Station and goes down to the smelter on the bottom of the South Island, the only place that power can go right now is into that smelter. So there's a fast track process that's been put in place to put new transmission lines in to connect Manapuri into the national grid and enable that power to be used somewhere else, not just in the bottom of the South Island. Now that's a project of national significance, and that was called in and went through fast-tracked RMA process. So those things exist now, and we're not proposing through this consultation to change any of those or supplement those. We think that whatever comes out of the RMA will come out of the RMA, and this is a separate issue to that.
And there's a reason for it. Yeah, we're as you are. We stand in this community. We work for this community. So we're trying to find a way to enable these renewables in a way that's complementary and doesn't require forcing in. And we think we can do that because of the ability to upgrade existing lines, because of the fact we don't think this is hugely. Apart from wind, which is tended to deploy anyway, and done quite well in the sense that the landowners find a way to get some extra money and communities work through that process. It seems to be possible to deploy renewables without having to have special powers. It would be a shame for things to be delayed if it's a great idea, but it's certainly something that we're not. We're hoping we can find a way that doesn't require it to be forced. We're hoping we can find a way that this works for this community and the community want it, and it turns up. So that's sort of our starting point. But some of those things will need to be considered through both through the consultation process and the writing of the rules and the more detailed provisions ultimately that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you. Question from me, and begin with a statement. Look, I'm very, very supportive of the idea of this pilot program being done in Northland rather than any other part of New Zealand, and in the first instance, and that's to help this region overcome its security of supply risk issues that it has, with its connection with the rest of the country and the generation, most of which is way down the line. The question that I have, though, is for you two as the chief executives, if all of this generation can occur in Northland and we're a significant net exporter of electricity to the rest of the country, including Auckland, where there's already a third of the New Zealanders live, in what way will prices relatively drop for Northlanders? This is retail, the home consumer, the ordinary person. How will prices be reduced when the laws of supply and demand change for our electricity supply here in Northland?
I'll just start, Russell, and then perhaps you can add some nuances. Because it's a market, it's very hard for us to make definitive statements. But what we can do is make some observations. Electricity up here costs about 20% more than it does down in the deep south, and that most of the time is just due to the losses that happen from transporting it all the way up. So that gets factored into the price, and they call that nodal pricing. So you can actually look on the grid map and you see the price in the south, price up here, and you go, oh, we're about 20% more. That's quite a lot. It would make sense that if your generation is closer and you're not making all those losses, that helps you get much closer to sort of an average price. So that 20% is a kind of an indicator of what might be possible. The other thing that we've got our eye on is the whole, we're interested because we've kind of lived through it, but the whole transmission pricing methodology that is currently coming in and has been talked about for a number of years does mean that as more infrastructure is built to build Energy North, anyone who's deemed to be a beneficiary of that has to split the costs, basically. So our thinking is, if we can be an exporter down to Auckland, there shouldn't be any case to say that anything that's built south of Auckland has anything to do with us as a beneficiary. So you would hope that our transmission charges would stay the same unless we're building transmission up here. Russell, do you want to perhaps build on those ideas?
Yeah, I can, and I'd really just add that any further lines that we build from Northland down into Auckland under that new methodology would be paid by people in Auckland, and they would give us the ability to have two-way flow of power if we needed it, but the beneficiary would be those people in Auckland. So it starts to change, that change in energy flow, and we've certainly seen it here under the existing pricing methodology. So the transmission prices in the far north went down by 65% this year under the existing pricing methodology. Now that's about a 10% price reduction in total on people's bills. Now, unfortunately, those changes are coming through with the new pricing methodology, and they'll go back up. But it shows you the difference that can be made if you're generating most of your power locally.
And look, thank you for that answer to the question, because where the consumers are is really important for all of us here. I've got an additional question. It's actually to our internal team inside Kaipara District Council, and so I'm going to say this is particularly with our policy team, and so maybe Louise and maybe Mr. Maris will be able to answer this, but it's a question about our district plan review that we're currently undertaking, if you like, and the opportunity when you look at the maps that are proposed here in these renewable energy zone, which covers a large piece of Kaipara district, and the theories and the opportunities here. And when we are talking about our district plan review that we are soon to go out to the public with, how could these ideas begin to be integrated or flagged as part of the opportunity ahead for Kaipara, which would be a significant renewable energy generating district?
Kia ora, Your Worship. Thank you for the question, and thanks to the gents and Philippa for your presentation. Look, just want to let you know that the district plan review briefing next week is actually got this on the agenda, renewable electricity generation, and we'll be looking at the draft provisions, objectives and policies around this. So a discussion next week. Great timing, I just have to say.
Lovely, lovely. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, that'll cover that off. That'll be beautiful. Okay, all right. We'll cross that bridge as we come to it. Sorry, Russell.
I was just going to suggest, I mean, how you run council is down to you, but what I think logically follows from this is land use, and where do we want these things? And that might be something that you choose to submit on as part of this consultation process. Because if we just follow an economic model, then the generation will be built at the points of the network which have existing capacity, and they will quickly be bought out and utilised. But that might not be actually from a long-term development plan or where you want them. So that might be something that you choose to submit on, because there is an element in the feedback on what other factors should be considered here.
Thank you.
Building on that, Russell, I think that is a really nice point. We sort of know power markets, so we can look at cost of infrastructure and how electricity pricing might move. But the whole idea of geospatial planning and land use and community use and community, I guess, trade-offs is something we're not really deep in, and we know council is. So it would go down really well with Transpower if there was some really clear thinking in terms of how this could be done, how it best be done for this community and in this community. And I really like the idea that Jason and team are looking at the detailed planning in your plans to say, cool, how could we enable this to the extent we believe it's a good idea. So I think that those things would go down well in consultation.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Such as issues, I guess, such as climate change, sea level rise, so on and so on and so on, how that it impacts here. Thank you. So for Kaipara District Council, we will be discussing this again and again and again over the next short period, which is a great opportunity. But today has been a very stimulating initial presentation here. Thank you, Russell, and thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Philippa, as well, for attending today and for for this opportunity. And I expect that we will be seeing you next week. I'll be seeing you next week at the Northland Mayoral Forum next week, and then as we've already heard, for Kaipara District Council for the district plan review briefing as well. So I expect hopefully by the time I get through that third presentation, I'll really understand it. I hope. Yeah, I hope it will have gone into the head. So thank you very much for your presentation today. And we look forward to Kaipara people contributing to submissions on this and to getting the pilot to take place in Northland. And I'd just like to say thank you for the efforts that you're putting in here on behalf of all of the people of the region in order to get a new kind of focus to this part of the country. And that is certainly acknowledged and appreciated. So thank you very much. You can see thumbs up from around the council table here. So thank you very much, team. Good luck and travel safely, and good luck with the electric. Thank you. Right.
Thank you, Dwight.
So we'll move on, please, to our third item for today's briefing, which is the policy work program update, which is being presented to us by Shireen Mundy. Shireen, morena. Shireen, you're on mute. Well, we can't hear you. No. No, you sound like...
Shireen, can I suggest you take your video off perhaps and just try with the audio on its own? Yes.
No, it's not the video. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
I've got a new camera that doesn't have an audio, but it messes my audio up. I don't know why that happened. Sorry. Aramai, apologies. I did try and test it this morning, but obviously not sufficiently. Sorry, where was I? Morena, Atamaria, thank you very much. So the item is fairly short. I'm going to take the item as read. Essentially, the item talks about two key elements or three key elements around the work program. One is that due to the restructure last year, some work elements of the previous policy team have been moved to the infrastructure strategy team, such as reserve management planning. So that will be reported to you by the excellent Mark Schrews, who is luckily still in the organisation, but no longer in our policy team. So that those work functions have moved with Mark to that team. The other key issue in this update report is that due to the heavy workload of the district plan and some of the team who normally work in the policy area being reallocated to assisting with the district plan work, we looked at the policy and bylaws work program, and we have moved that around and shuffled that around and deferred some of the work that was initially planned for this year to allow staff to concentrate on the district plan. And that is provided, so the forward work program is in attachment B. I would note that also, given the extreme range of legislative changes that are coming through from Three Waters through to RMA, through to climate change, through to the LGA, the local government review, and in and of itself, we may be in a completely different position in terms of what does need and does not need to be reviewed in the next 2 years. So ahead of picking up the program again next year, there are some things that will need to be picked up, definitely ahead of that, but we're hoping that we'll have a bit of a clearer playing field at that point in time. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Withy, question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Shireen, in your schedule or attachment A, you've got a couple of high priorities in terms of reviews, and one of them is the sign bylaw, you've got it high priority and it's in progress, but you've got no target date for it being due. Have you got any indication when you think that should be coming to us?
Apologies, through the chair, the science bylaw. So it is a high priority in the sense, just to elaborate on that, the science bylaw work is a high priority in terms of doing the mahi around what it should contain, because we are aiming for a New Zealand Wild World First where we have a district plan sign rule aligned with the bylaw rules. So we're quite excited about that. I know that that is a complete policy wonk statement, but so we're working very hard on drafting a sign bylaw alongside the district plan signs rules that match up. So it's a high priority work for us to do that work in the background, but obviously, but it's not a high priority in terms of timeframes. It's not a high priority to bring that to council for consideration. We just want to make sure that we get the basic premise and approach right, what rule should sit where, and then we're going to come back to council with that later on in the year. So that was a little, so it's a high priority workload for us right now to do the thinking, if that answers the question.
Yeah, no, just a terminology, obviously, just a bit confusing.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thank you. Elected members, are there any further questions for clarification? No further questions. Very, very simple. Look, Shireen, again, thank you. Your calendar of work here is very clear and we can see what's going on, and we have transparency here into the work of the policy that as they're coming through on the calendar. This is really important and good to see. And you've indicated about the central government changes which are afoot as well. We're aware that though the calendar of that work does not show in this, but is a significant extra set of policy changes that are in the wind. Trying to keep across all of it is important for all of us and for the community about how the policy framework is changing for the people. But you've presented very clearly here. Thank you. So
you're welcome.
So all right, thank you. So everyone, we'll leave the. Sorry, we're scheduled to break here at this point in today's agenda after this third item, and that's 1 hour into today's meeting. So I propose that we break now for 15 minutes to resume at 10:45, resuming at 10:45 a.m. with the Adaptive Pathways Pilot Project work. Thank you. Ka kite anō. Oh, the future's so bright, gotta wear shades, I tell you. Sounds like a line from a song from the 80s.
Yeah, not as bright down my way, but yeah, wheels are falling off somewhat.
But with this renewable energy zone is
It's exciting.
fascinating. Very, very, very fabulous for the security of supply and the safety of everyone in Northland.
Yeah, great
Yes.
thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also know that the volcanologists are talking about Auckland getting a new volcano within the next 400 years. So I'm not saying that it's tomorrow, but nevertheless, I think it's a really interesting moment that the security of supply will become increasingly important when Northland is an island. Anyway, that's another story.
Talk about any more global or significant disasters? I'm kind of
okay. All right. I apologize.
Disasters right now.
Arohamai. Turning adversity to opportunity. Right, we're moving on with today's Kaipara District Council briefing, and as continuing with our future-focused lens here, we now have a piece on the Adaptive Pathways Pilot Project, which will be led by our Climate Change Policy Advisor, Katie Simon. Morena, Katie.
Kia ora. I liked that. I was feeling like a contestant on a game show. That was good. A good intro. Kia ora koutou. It's really good to see you. It's very late in the year, but Happy New Year's to you all. Like Mr. Mayor, like you said, I am going to be presenting an item on the Adaptive Pathways pilot, specifically around starting a discussion on the community panel participation and representation. So I will just share my screen. And let me know, please, when you see that. I need to move this. Is that coming through okay? Hopefully. All right, so awesome, thank you. So really the purpose of this briefing item is to get some direction on Council's representation and participation, for the Adaptive Pathways pilot. It's really a starting point for discussion on how you as elected members see yourselves involved in the pilot. And yeah, to start this kind of corridor around how elected members want to be actively involved, the scale of involvement, specifically on the community panel. So just quick outline, I'll talk through some context where we're at in the process of the Adaptive Pathways planning and in establishing the planning as a project, and then talk through the participation options that staff have identified so far, and it's an opportunity to discuss any other options, and then go through representation options as well, and then just wrap up with next steps. So context, as you all already know, back in December, Council adopted Ruai and Ropo as the pilot areas for our Adaptive Pathways planning. We are committed under the LTP to start a pilot and also another major Adaptive Pathways project in the 21-31 LTP cycle. So we are currently sitting in the what is happening kind of phase of the process. That's the wheel that you see on the right. That was also in the report. You've seen this wheel before. We've just put kind of a KDC spin on it in terms of our colors and branding. So slightly different color wise. But we are really sitting in this what's happening phase. There are 5 phases to the process. It's a cyclical process. And we're kind of halfway between steps 1 and steps 2. So we're sitting within the preparation context step right now in terms of establishing the project, kind of a project architecture, solidifying that, identifying our professional services requirements and starting kind of our early procurement process around that, doing some early engagement and outreach with our Mana Whenua partners as well to understand their interest, capacity for involvement, leading to, at some point, initial engagement with marae in the area as well. And doing some early engagement with kind of key members of the community as well, just to start the conversation around this process, why we're doing it, and to get some guidance on further engagement. So that's essentially where we're at right now in the kind of preparation context step. In step 2, the hazard and sea level rise assessment step, We already have, you know, from last year, our coastal hazards modeling for Te Tai Tokoro for the Northland region as a whole. Ruai-Ropo area is doing, there's some revised modeling underway, as you know. So we are waiting on that. But we, as a part of that, along with the modeling, are also going to be doing some initial engagement, early engagement around community understandings of the changes that they see in the coastal environment as well. So that's part of it. There's two sides to the coin. We've got our modeling technical sides and then our community understanding side to really reach a shared understanding of what's happening in the area. So that's just gives you a bit of context around the process and what we're focusing on in the project right now. And the other main kind of piece of context that we're really working towards with our engagement is the establishment of the community panel. So this is kind of the heart of the project, the heart of the process, if you will. The image on the right of the PowerPoint slide is my attempt at establishing a bit of a project structure for you to see. So this may change, but we're roughly going to be following this structure in that we will have these groups and these different organizations supporting the process. So we have our projects team, our technical advisory group, the community panel, as you can see at the center, reporting up to, providing recommendations to Kaipara District Council for final decisions. And then also the links to the joint committee as well, who, you know, have a responsibility to provide that kind of collaborative alignment oversight from a regional side of things. So that's just to give you an idea of how it all fits together. That was also in the report. So the panel, it is the main kind of representative body. It will be the main representative body for Ruai-Ropo communities. It will be a working group or an advisory group, so they won't have any mandate to make decisions on behalf of council. They will provide recommendations to council to then make the final decision. So that's the arrow feeding right up to council. And the key kind of output, you know, of the process and for the group, for the panel, is the community adaptation plan. So that is the document, if you will, that will have the decisions around community objectives and values, decisions around what are acceptable levels of risks to the community, thresholds of risks to the community, decisions around, well, what are our options for responding then in the short, medium, long term, and what are our pathways? So how do we line those options up? How do we progress those options? And also, what are our signals or indicators when it's time to switch from one option to the next for the whole Ruai-Ropo area? So that's a big output. Again, it will come to council, but it's a big piece of mahi. It's a big responsibility for the group. So it's extremely important that the group, the panel is representative, thoroughly representative and inclusive of the whole Ruai-Ropo community. So we have a really good understanding and that they have the ability to really speak on behalf of the whole Ropo Ruai community. So that's one of the critical aspects we're working towards in establishing the panel. The panel makeup is just how the different members will function, or people who attend the sessions will function. So you'll have your full members who are your full voting members. They all have full speaking rights. You'll have your observer participants who can attend sessions, but do not have full voting rights. They're not full members. And then you have your technical, and this is your more operational side of things. You'll have your technical advisors and your project team also attending and supporting the session. So there will be a lot of people in the room able to support, but your full members are the panel members themselves, and they're the ones who have final say in recommendations that go to council. So in terms of options identified so far, we have two options that I have as, you know, in my looking at other examples across the Motu, across other councils have identified. I don't want elected members limited to these two options. This is just a starting point for discussion. So really the aim is, if there are any other options on that elected members would like to put on the table to discuss, that's kind of a key output of this as well. But these are the two that I have identified so far. And the first option for elected members to participate on the panel is around basically being an observer participant. So elected members can be observers, they can provide advice, they'll be present, and they can speak when approved by the chair. And I see a couple of hands up, so I'll just finish this thought and then I'll go to, I think Councillor Worthy had his hand. Is that, if that's, yeah. And or they can, but the speaking rights need to be granted by the chair, basically at discretion of the chair, and they don't have final voting rights. So staff.
Katie,
oh, yep.
Katie,
Yes.
yes. I think what we might do is break this question and answer session with you down into parts, which is a bit like how the elected members approach the exceptions report in our normal monthly council meetings, that we break it down into component parts. And so I would suggest here that we do everything up to the place you've got to here regarding participation options for elected members. So everything in your presentation to this moment. So elected members, I'd say if anyone has any questions or matters to discuss on everything up to this point in the presentation, let's go now, and then we'll come into this participation piece next. And so I've got a starter for that, but Councillor Worthy, is yours for an earlier piece in this presentation?
It is exactly what you've suggested, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Worthy, yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Katie, I just want a bit of clarification, if I could. You put it in your presentation just now, saying that the panel that you're suggesting, the community panel, regardless of whether it's got elected members on it or not, I'm just saying that the terms of reference is that they would make recommendations to council for consideration and possible adoption. However, in your paper that you put out to us, underneath this diagram with the community panel representation on it, you make the statement, the adaptive pathways approach includes a commitment from the council to support and implement the recommendations of the panel. That's a very, very strong statement, and it also almost suggests that recommendations from the panel would be automatically adopted by the council, which I think is at odds with what you've just explained to us during the presentation. Could you comment on that, please?
Absolutely, and I can see where that seems a bit paradoxical, those two statements. So by committing to following an adaptive pathways and a community adaptation planning process to make decisions on our future adaptation responses, we are committing to putting community at the center of this. This isn't a 100% community-led process, but this is a community-centered process. So we are committing as council, by committing to establishing a panel, that we will, and maybe I could have worded the report slightly more strategically, so I apologize if that was misleading, but we are committing to taking seriously, or as best as we can, follow the recommendations of the panel. That being said, the panel isn't, there's going to be a very robust, long, technical, expert supported process where we go through consentability, costing, all of that to come up with the adaptation responses and the preferred pathways. So the community panel is going to be providing recommendations that are solid in that process, if that makes sense. And they will be tangible options. They will be cost-effective options. Ideally, that's the outcome. And they'll be options that meet community values and objectives. So it will come to council for final recommendation. But by committing to the process, we are committing to taking seriously the recommendations of the panel and trusting that the process that they go through is robust and it is valid and it follows legal requirements and consenting requirements, if that makes sense. Yeah, so hopefully that clarified it.
So can I just come in on, excuse me, Councillor Worthy, can I just come in on exactly the same point? The RMA provides the guidelines for the hierarchy here of the, have regard to, give effect to all those sorts of things. Would you like to consider, Katie, taking a look at those RMA, that hierarchy, give effect to, have regard to, so on and so on, in this space? Because I think Councillor Worthy has raised a key point here. It's one thing to address and acknowledge what is in this work, and it's potentially a multi-billion-dollar story to implement.
Mm-hmm.
So
Absolutely.
we need to manage expectations here
Yep.
about what we're doing and just make this the expectations and everything safe for council as well as all the people in this. Okay,
Absolutely.
so thank you, Councillor Wethy, for raising that, and your RMA training has been very helpful here. Councillor Wethy, back to you.
Yeah, just before I finished, I think what you said before, Katie, where you said to support and seriously consider the recommendations, because one of the things that the panel may not have at their disposal, obviously, because it's not in their brief, is the overall fiscal responsibility for the district, and the overlay of that fiscal responsibility with the recommendations has got to be matched and married together, and that's what council's elected member of the council responsibility will be. So seriously considered, I'd accept. Implement as of right, obviously would not necessarily be able to be considered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Curnow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I just sort of also had a little highlight on that, just in terms of, I also note that in amongst between the community panel and the technical advisory group, there doesn't, and I'm sure it's there, but hidden, there doesn't seem to be any kind of budgeting expertise, because yeah, it comes down to the doability. I mean, we could build any kind of infrastructure to protect a community, but how is that going to be paid for? So I'm just interested how that process kind of weaves into the structure that we've got here. And the other question I had was, there are, and I think you've got it under other Kuiper, Northland and national interested stakeholders. Are you talking there about sort of the various government agencies that might be useful in this space or helpful, have information, maybe have resources, maybe be able to feed into central government on different needs and things like that? So there's, yeah, I'm wondering and also civil defence, we heard from Laura earlier on, and civil defence should probably be in there as well, whether that's actually the technical advisory group or whether there's another sort of layer which is kind of stakeholder advisors or stakeholder partners or something like that that sort of comes in on that. But I do feel that, yeah, particularly we in the community panel, we've got Rangatahi Youth. So where's the Ministry for Education? Because there's two big schools and a kindy. Well, big schools, two schools and a kindy involved here. So there's a ministry that's got responsibilities and interests in this space. And there's, obviously Ministry for Transport with the roading and all of that. So yeah, that kind of infrastructure owners and perhaps needs, and I'm not sure where that sits in there. But so yeah, that was a question. Yeah, so at this point, that was the kind of key questioning I had, and I'm not expecting answers immediately. Yeah.
Thanks. So through the chair, yeah, I can at a high level speak to those. I can't provide specifics on details and agreements and people who have committed to joining the panel and organizations, because we aren't there yet in the process. But just in terms of budgeting and understanding budgeting constraints and the ratepayer model and who pays in that question, that is a massive question, and that's not a question that will be glossed over. That question will take a lot of time to work through and will be a key consideration for the response options and for the order of response options as well. So I just want to stress that cost of different response options is a key element of it. And obviously the communities as ratepayers, our community members as ratepayers will have a lot to say on that on the panel as well. So and providing that budgeting expertise from a council side of things, and also providing kind of a model for approaching kind of multi-criteria cost benefit analysis into the decision-making process. Those are two resources that will be required to support this. So it doesn't show it on the technical advisor group. I kind of just did the main the roles, but as needed, we will be inviting specific staff to come. So we might invite our infrastructure planners leads to come as well, or say our consent leads to come to certain panel sessions where it is required for them to provide that input, and the same with finance. So that is there. It just doesn't show that because and this is, we're talking a year out from now when we'll be having these conversations. So we do have some time. This is not going to happen in 2 months' time. This is to get to the what do we want to do question. We still need to go through the what matters most phase of the process, which will provide a lot more clarity around where we're going to and what's acceptable for the community. And that could easily take up to, I don't have strict timeframes, but this could easily take up to 6 months to do that phase. So
Yeah.
we have some time. Yeah.
Okay.
But in terms of stakeholders, absolutely, we're going to invite stakeholder organizations that have a role or a responsibility to either the community in the area or the natural environment in the area. Absolutely. It will be an invitation to sit as participant observers. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Quick question from me, Katie. You've mentioned here on page 3 of your report, and you've explained about a chair and a co-chair. To me, this aspect is totally confusing.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Because you have a chair and then a deputy chair. Yeah.
Okay.
And that's what you've described in the words. But you would have co-chairs, which are at the same level and chair equally and between and among themselves and work as partners to create the chair role, because they are co-chairing 2 aspects that come together. So I'm not certain here what you're talking to, because it sounds that you're saying there will be a chair and then there will be a deputy chair.
Okay.
So can you please clarify what you were going for here? Because it is of key importance, and I'd say at a statement level, in my involvement with treaty-related organisations and treaty partners, the notion of co-chair being someone from council, say, and someone or the community and someone representing mana whenua is very clear to me, and I understand that model, but whether that's what we're going for, or whether you're just saying, look, there's a chair and there's a deputy chair, is a discussion to be made and an aspect of the decision that the council will need to make here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So I don't know, if it probably doesn't need any discussion now for direction, but what I'd say, please, can we have some work on that for when this comes to a decision of the council? Yeah.
Absolutely. What I can say is, from an operational side of things, we have Tracy as our governance advisor, who is participating and supporting the project structure and architecture as well, the development. So that is a conversation we can absolutely have. And we're starting the early engagement with key mana whenua representatives, and we can also have that conversation, their expectations as well. So we can do that. So by March council meeting, I can have some more information for you on that and clarity.
Yep, that would be very good. Thank you. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I do have a question. Katie, thank you for your presentation. I pick up on your point that this is this panel process is a long way from being actually active, but what we're determining is what matters most. And I'd like to give some feedback that what matters most for the community panel is that it's truly a community panel, and that this council and this project does not breach the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act 1990 by applying discrimination on the grounds of vaccination status to any community members that may wish to participate, and any stakeholders and any elected members. And I would ask this council to make sure that they are not in breach of the New Zealand Bill of Rights Act when this panel is constituted. And that is my feedback. Thank you.
Thank you. I completely expect that the composition and rules around all of this will be entirely legal. So, as with everything else that we attempt to do. But thank you for that feedback, Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock. At this point, I've got a further 2 questions on your chart on page 2, Katie, and one of these is with the org chart that you've got. Perhaps you could just go back in your presentation so that we're, yeah, that one, lovely, thank you. The question, and I guess I'm looking in the top, or I'm looking kind of on the left side of this here, and I'm saying, how would the outcomes of this link with the new RMA reforms, particularly around the regional spatial planning that's being proposed? How do we see this work connecting with that regional body that's going to say, actually, it's about, you know, the shiny city of Whangarei, where's Raupo, for example?
That is a great question, and that's probably not a question I have an immediate answer for, and probably not a question I should answer on my own. I think that is probably a question that we would support the community panel to discuss once it's established, with elected members participating however they decide as well, to support that conversation, and with the right technical advisors in the space as well. But it's absolutely a question we're going to need to continuously ask throughout the process. I don't think it's a reason to not do it. Absolutely. And we've already made that call with other, you know, major projects we have going on, major work we have going on as council. But I agree, it's a question we absolutely need to ask, but not one that I think I feel comfortable answering.
Thank you.
Right now off the top of my head.
Thank you, but thank you for addressing it in the way that you have.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I've got a further final question for you. You've got here down in the kind of bottom rightish corner, to be determined marae adaptation planning. So this will of course be being done by Mana Whenua, and so is there, and this will be being done, I would assume, in parallel with in the similar sort of time frames, and then will help to feed in.
That's where the TBD is really, that's exactly what it's around. So the questions we are starting to have the conversation with key representatives, marae representatives that we're really in the early stages of that. So I want to stress that, because we need to do that process authentically and we need to do it well. And it takes time to do that. Apologies, my dog is barking. Is around, how do the marae see, you know, there is an opportunity for involvement. There's an invitation for involvement and participation. What is marae interest? What feels appropriate for them? What is their capacity? And what are their needs around adaptation? So we're really starting by asking the questions, not coming to them with pre-decided pathways around, this is how it's going to work, here's the process, you know, if you guys want to come and join, this is how you're going to do it. So it's more approaching it from what are the needs and how can we support, given this is the resourcing we have available. So it's again that managing expectations as well. We're not going to solve the world with this, but we can start to have these early conversations around needs and participation.
Sorry, just so we're clear, under what you're describing would be being facilitated by the council, not facilitated independently by the marae, based on your description?
It could be. So at this point, we don't know. So we might have, and this is completely hypothetical, I want to stress this is completely hypothetical. Maumai marae, for instance, might have the representative say, we would like to take advantage of this planning process that's happening, and we would like to run in parallel and be actively involved from the whole Ruai Ropo pilot. Or they might say, we like the model, but it doesn't fully speak to the Te Ao Māori or the kawa of our hapu, of our whānau. So we might do something different, and here's the relationship we expect to have with council on this, and that would reach an agreement, obviously. So that's the conversation that's yet to happen. And that's what we need to have first, and that will take a bit of time. So I do recognize that the Ropo Ruai wider pilot timeframes might go faster than the marae timeframes as well. So, but we are in that early conversation. So we're having initial kōrero actually yeah, this week and next week. Yep. I apologize, I don't have a very clear answer for you. There's also NRC has a program of works that they have set through their LTP around hopu-led adaptation. So there's an opportunity as well to link up there, which we haven't fully scoped out yet, but we are, that is on the table as well to have that conversation. Yep.
All right, thank you. Do you see any risk in confusion and or duplication here when people are talking about the same place?
Potentially. Yes, that's where we need to be quite clear on our communications around some aspects of this. I will say, and I didn't speak to this because it's getting slightly operational, but part of our early engagement is around what's this project actually called, because the Ruawai Ropo Adaptation Planning Pilot Project obviously isn't the best name. So we are coming up with an actual brand and identity for this mahi that's, you know, speaks to that. And so hopefully that'll add some clarity, because then that will be called that. And when we come to Marae and are talking about their adaptation needs and process and how that might link up, they'll have a separate name and process as well. So hopefully there will be some clarity when we actually have clear branding and identity for these. But again, that's part of that early conversation, early engagement.
So yeah, so I would hazard, if I may provide some direction, the title of this needs to describe what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it is an adaptation planning project. Sorry, it's like we can't give it a cool groovy name because it is a very, very serious kind of almost statutory piece of work, civil at a almost civil defense-y sort of level, you know. It needs to, the title needs to describe exactly what it is. Yeah. Thank you, because it's only a plan. Yeah, but it's all in the plan. Yeah, thank you. Elected members, are there further points up to this point in the presentation? Then we'll move on into Katie's next slides here. Lovely. Okay, Katie, if we can pick it up, please, with your two approaches here. Yeah, thank you. Regarding participation for elected members. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so just to recap again, these are the two options that I have identified thus far. I don't want elected members to feel limited to these two options. I don't want to preempt or take the place of the council meeting where this discussion really occurs. But this is just a starting point to have this discussion. And very quickly recap again, the two options are based from, well, option one's based from precedent that's been set by other councils who are doing the same process as well. So Thames Core Mandel District Council, Hauraki District Council, the Clifton Tangoyo, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council projects, as well as Kapiti Coast District Council. So those are the four councils that I was able to find their terms of reference or descriptions of their panel. And that's where option one comes from, as elected members participating as observer participants. And then option two is full members on the panel. So again, not limited to these two. There might be other options to discuss, but I just, that's what I have as a starting point. And yeah, the description's there on the,
okay,
on the PowerPoint.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you. The approach that I'd like to take to this is, rather than what you see written on the screen saying that there are firm options that anyone's going for, I would like elected members really just to focus on, if you like, if there's anything to which they have an allergic reaction. Okay, so we're trying to steer away from this or steer away from that rather than picking an option. All right, so so that's what I'd like elected members, please, to focus on, that notion of, is there anything on between these two kind of pathways where anyone has a kind of an allergic reaction. So we're going to go to Councillor Wethy, then Councillor Curnow to kick us off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess looking at your option one, Katie, with the observer participation, one of the things that if we choose this path to go down for elected members, and I see this as it has already been used in practice and seems to be working in other councils. But one of my concerns in what you've put there is that any speaking rights may be granted at the discretion of the chair. Now, at the discretion of the chair effectively gives the chair the right of veto to allow to prevent elected members who are observers from talking. And I think that is something that we need to be wary of, because I think that is an option where elected members could give very good counsel to the community panel and make it much more rounded recommendation in due course. I think that is the area that in option one I have the most issue with, but it's certainly an option that I think is one we should seriously look at, especially in view of the fact it has been used successfully in other councils. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Curnow.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was just sort of looking at, obviously there's two options in front of us. Could you, Katie, just give us some insight into your consideration of a third option, which may be to have no elected members on there? Has anyone done that, and what was your thinking around that?
No, so the only example I could find is of option one. So that was my brain went to, and this is how my brain functions, is that, okay, the other option would be to be full, but yes, there's absolutely possibility of not having elected members present at the panel sessions at all, and it being strictly staff from a technical side of things, and strictly the project team supporting and representing council at an operational level, and then strictly community. So that is absolutely a third option. I just didn't go there. I went more to, okay, the other option would be full participation and full membership. But the option one is the only option that I found from the other councils.
Yeah, it's not that I'm necessarily saying that's I want no participation, but I just think it would be just for completeness, it's probably helpful for us to look at that as a possibility, that it is just community and technical, and the political side of it stays in our usual political sphere. But it's not. I'm stressing. I'm not showing feeling a preference. I'm just interested in that being just teased out so that we understand that the other options available.
Absolutely. Yep. Perhaps, and this is just, I'm floating it now as a third, it could be something through the joint committee. So you could have your elected members that are participating on the joint committee potentially there as a joint committee, and then that links to some degree, but it'd be through the avenue of the Joint Climate Adaptation Committee. Another potential option. I would leave it to you all as a discussion, but a potential one to discuss. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's worth having on the page. Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Thank you. So, elected members, is there further commentary or direction, if you like? Anything here about which anyone is feeling particularly allergic?
Yes. I've got.
Wethy.
I guess when you made the comment, anything allergic. Well, I guess I would be perhaps feeling an allergy coming on, shall we say, in option two, if you had elected members with voting rights. I think that does put a different overlay on what would happen when it comes to a full council meeting and the recommendation was being considered. And I think that's something we'd need to be mindful of if you had elected members with voting rights on the community panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there further commentary from elected members here? From me, my preference, and I'm quite quite allergic here to the elected members of the council having voting rights and full speaking rights, and, if you like, dominating or being seen to dominate the community panel. I think the important thing here is that we have a really clear governance framework and a really clear set of understandings how bottom up and top down work together for the place, and that because in my observation in communities right across Kaipara, the moment councillors, elected members are present and in decision-making space, the community will turn to the councillors and elected members and kind of sometimes say, well, this is your job, you do it. This is all hard, this is your job, you do it. And part of what we're doing here is a significant bottom-up engagement to engender ownership and all of the benefits that this adaptive pathway planning can bring us. And so if elected members are there, then the community that may not work so well. Yeah. So option 2, I'm certainly steering away from. That's just some feedback from me for those reasons, that I want the community to celebrate its own voices. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just quickly want to say that I concur with those comments and the comments made by Councillor Webby.
Thank you. Thank you. So are there any further commentary on this? Councillor Curnow.
Just to state my level of allergy, yes, I'm leaning more towards the elected members having a very soft involvement in this, and it's about supporting and not leading. And the community, this is highly sensitive and very difficult stuff for communities to be dealing with, and I think elected members could deflect from that by their presence. But if they are going to have a presence, I would even suggest that if they are going to have a presence, even just one, as a very soft space in that, just to ensure that if there was any relationship between the group and council that needed to be supported, then that was the space they operated in. But these are decisions that communities really need to be leading and not council. Yeah. So that's my level of allergy.
Thank you. Right, Katie, continuing. Back to you.
All right. So moving on then from the how to the who. And these pretty much are questions to get some direction and get some feedback on around which elected members then, whether it's as observer participants, full members, or I guess if there's no one there, then this is probably a moot discussion, but we'll still have it. And this is entirely at council's discretion. And to give you an idea of responsibilities, it would be 3 to 4 sessions probably. We're looking at quarterly, roughly. Again, this is all needs to be determined, and as we draft, Mr. Mayor, like you said, a strong governance framework, a clear terms of reference, clear standards of practice, all of that. And that the elected member who represents council in whatever way is more of the council face. So we have some consistency with communication and the project. There will be community faces of the project as well, so key community members who are kind of our spokespersons, spokespeople, but the representative of council would be kind of the council side. So it wouldn't be myself, for instance, that's inappropriate. It would be, yeah, a council member. Yeah, so these are just the questions: which elected members to participate and represent council. That leads to the next steps, which would then be some direction for bringing a report seeking decision on participation. Again, doesn't need to be just option 1 or 2, and then representation. So the idea is that the March council meeting will seek appointment of elected members on the panel in either way. Yeah. So that's it. Kia ora. Yeah.
And from what we've heard today, I'm not certain that there may be elected members on the panel, Katie. So there are, but that decision will be yet ahead for us. The because the feedback, today is, like I say, is challenging regarding council presence dominating, which we don't want as a direction. So how do we not come in from the top? That's the policy design that I would seek here.
Thank you. Yep. Absolutely.
So I'm not certain about this part here. Are there further is there further commentary or points from elected members at this point? Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I already circulated my concerns about this item before the meeting, and I think we're in a space right now where those particular chickens are coming home to roost, because I do think, as we normally do as a matter of practice, when it is a matter of deciding membership of various other entities, that is a decision which is made at a council meeting. And also, as you have yourself just now raised, there is that further option, which I think is at least needs consideration theoretically to provide a more complete choice for us as councillors. At least is that it's equivalent of the do nothing option, where we have no membership on that committee, and if that's the case, then the consideration of representation is somewhat moot. Thank you.
That's clear, Councillor Vincent. Thank you for that. So is there further feedback at this point, elected members? No further feedback at this point. So Katie, I hope this has been clear for you today about this key item.
Kia ora. Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
All right. Thank you very much. Go well. Okay. Ka kite anō. Thank you, everybody. We're moving on to item number 5 for today. Oh, actually, just before we do, what we might do, this will be our final item for today is regarding the draft annual plan. I suggest we break just for 5 minutes right now, just a quick break so everyone can get a glass of water. We'll resume, thank you, at 11, by my clock, 11:37. Thank you. 5 minutes from now. Right, kia ora. Welcome back, everyone. And this is our final item, item number 5 for today's Kaipara District Council briefing, which is the draft annual plan 2022-23 financials. And in the paper that we have here, the number, the percentage number for the proposed rates increase has now been brought back to exactly what it was in the long-term plan. So, so nominally on that level, we are meeting one of the key requirements and commitments that we made to our community here. But of course, the content for what's going on underneath that headline number, which seems to be the thing that most people focus on, is actually a bit of a different story. To present this story, we have Graham Coleman, who's going to be leading this item with us. We also have our General Manager for Strategic Growth and Investment, Sue Davidson, here to be able to answer questions from elected members. But Graham, in the first instance, we're going to go to you to lead us through this item. Thank you. Kia ora.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just share my screen and start the presentation. Okay, so essentially what we're doing here is I'm going to take the paper that I've presented as read. This just brings everything together from all the work that we've done to date and the decisions that Council's made. and basically pulling all the financials together, which will appear in the final annual plan document. So where we are at the moment is the long-term plan had the proposed rates increase at 7.13%. Back in December, the Council resolved to make it 7.57. And then we indicated at a briefing last month that it would be 7.17. We've just done some final work and we've rounded it back down to match up with what the long-term plan said. The difference was only 14,000 in terms of general rates. It wasn't significant. And the result of that is the financials that are attached to the report. And we've also modelled those across some sample properties across the district, and that's an attachment B. And then we've also done a little bit of work on the water in terms of working out what the charges would be. So the long-term plan had an increase of 4.96% from the previous year. The draft financials that were presented reflect 17.74%, which is quite big. And the two key changes for that are the new water standards and the maintenance contract, which is under negotiation at the moment. So that number may change once it's finalised, but at the moment we've got that indicative number only of 200,000. And we've modelled the water charges as well in attachment B, and then the table that I've got here is actually a screenshot from the report. So you can see what the charges for the first metre will change from. So the increase is that 18%, 17.74 essentially. And then the volumetric charges after that is actually just a 16% increase. And the reason for that is that the volume of water changes over time. So as you supply more water, that the charge per metre goes down, per cubic metre goes down. So the next steps from here are we're currently working on the forecast to see where we'll end up for June 22. That will be presented to the council meeting in March. That will give us an indication to say where we think we're going to end up and whether there's any options there for council to use some of the surplus or the savings that we're making this year to apply against the general rates. At the moment, it is looking like there will be some savings. At the moment, I don't want to give you a number because, as I say, we're still working through it. And then we're going to bring the draft annual plan back to council briefing in May, and then the final adoption would be at the June council meeting. Before this briefing, there was a couple of questions that came through from councillors. Councillor Wethy noted that in the rates modelling attachment B, for Mangawhai, we had a property there of 350,000 land value, and it didn't have a stormwater charge to it. We've checked that one, and the address was actually a rural one, so it was just outside the Mangawhai urban boundary. But we have dropped in an urban one to see, so you can see what the difference is with a stormwater charge applied. There was also a subsequent question around were the other stormwater charges correct, and yes, they are. And there's no stormwater scheme for Mangataroto. And Councillor Curnow asked, can she see, or can we see the impact on the subsequent year? So this gives you the changes for the current year, the 7.13, and then the next green column, this one here, is what the long-term plan said for year, that would be year 3, which was a 3.92% increase, and these changes as they flow through would actually take that up to a 7.7, and then the water charges are down below. So that's all I've got at the moment, Mr. Mayor, so I'm happy to take any other questions.
Thank you, Graham. Elected members, and this last chart, this is very, very helpful for us. Thank you, because it links back with the LTP. Elected members, are there questions for clarification? Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, further questions?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hi, Graham. I did send in a question, or some questions to Gavin, but he's on leave, so I don't know if you got them.
Sorry, carry on.
Oh, so I just wanted to know about growth and how 1% growth is added in or forecast, and how growth actually does impact on our costs or our on our finances or our rating burden, because we know there's growth, but what would be if there weren't growth? What can you explain how it works and how we do the finances with growth?
So should we get Sue Davidson to answer this question, please? Sue, come on.
Yeah.
Yes, you're on the screen. Kia ora.
Thank you. Thank you. Through the Mayor, yes, we do add that into our budget because that has been in the past a good basis. And I checked with Christine, and we are running at 0.6% this year to the end of February. So it looks like it could be on 1% by the time we get to the end of the year. So that's what we put. So 1% is a good basis to use.
Sorry, so Sue, I'm going to come in here and further ask Councillor De Lavaris' question, if you like. Why is there a rating charge for this thing called growth? Why, in the first instance, what does it represent? Why do we do this? Way back at the very beginning of the story.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so we've got a number of properties, say it might be 14,000, say 14,000 at the beginning of the year. So during the year, there's new growth, new properties are being connected to our sewer or are being rateable, they're being subdivisions. At the end of the year, we know that it's not going to be 14,000, it might be 1% higher, which would be an extra 140 properties or or thereabouts. That might be related to growth, and sometimes there are some because of people coordinate, just make their properties put together. There are some reductions, but generally we're increasing because of growth. So we take that into account because at the next financial year they will actually be rated. So rather than rating the 14,000 for all the costs, we say that we know that come 1st of July, there's going to be 14,140 properties and we'll rate them accordingly. And generally looking at the growth numbers to date, we seem to be in line with that. So there's unlikely to be any change to that. Does that help?
I understand that. And now thank you for that explanation. Because I didn't, I knew that. But so as we keep growing at 1% a year, which we have been more or less as far as I remember, in my terms, how is it that with that extra 140 and then another 140 and then another 140, that our rates aren't held in check, because I know, like, it's not as if our levels of service are going up, or we've introduced waste minimisation, recycling services, or anything. So why can't the more rating numbers,
the rating base increase?
Yeah,
Okay.
rating base,
because
keep
you're not
our
correct.
level in check.
Yeah, so through the chair, you're not correct. What you're doing is you're wanting to fast forward the district plan, and in fact, you've put $857,000 in for the district plan. Which is new. We've put in 250. We've put in other costs like the new library. We've and there's also new staff to deal with different areas of council and what we're having to respond to in the community. So those costs are going up, and they have to be reflected and spread. So
So I know that we've got a lot of vacancies, so I don't understand why the staff keep going up.
We have got a lot of vacancies, and we're trying to fill those because we do need those people. So what we are trying to look at between now and June, when you approve, is how better, what are the opportunities for funding things like the district plan out of retained earnings from this year, given that we look like we're doing reasonably well, and we don't want to make that presumption now. As Graham has mentioned, we're doing the forecast, so there may be some way to move there, and Graham and myself will be looking at that over the next couple of months. We will also, and that's pretty positive. We will also be looking at we'll have the figures probably by the end of the month as to what impact negotiation of contracts may mean on our costs for water, wastewater, and also the general rate. So that will have been fixed, but at the moment we don't have that, and we've put in some assumptions. So we're quite hopeful that we'll be able to get it down, but we can't say so at the moment. We don't want to make promises at the moment.
Thank you. We'll just bring in Louise Miller here. Louise, kia ora.
Kia ora. So also just to highlight, and I know that I've spoken to elected members separately, but we are also waiting on strategic pay to come back around our pay review. So whilst there may be some reductions, there are also likely to be some increases that we will need to factor in. Unfortunately, that information is not going to be available until May, but we do know there will be some pressures added that currently aren't reflected in the figures.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Vincent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a bit scary, eh? Like what we have got, our staff have managed to pull things in so that we're back in line with what the long-term plan said we were going to have. But it's, from the point of view of the people out there, it's still 7.13%. And that's a scary number, and I'm very open to looking at how we can make that a slightly smaller number, and bearing in mind with what 360,000 or 400,000 is roughly 1% on the rates. I suppose it provides an opportunity for me to give vent to my misgivings about the pace and nature of the district plan review, which is soaking up a lot of extra money. I was thinking of how we're going at kind of, in planning terms, to me, breakneck speed. And if you act in haste, you have the opportunity to contemplate your regrets at your leisure. And I'm very concerned that we're not managing to fully talk our way through the issues. The scope of that review is beyond what many of us, I'll speak for myself, as far as I was concerned, it goes far beyond what I expected we would be having with a focused review. And so I just raised the question of whether we should be looking at putting the district plan back into regular drive rather than overdrive, and save ourselves some expenses on consultants and the like. So as a
Ms.
way
Maris has joined the screen to help answer this question.
Kia ora, Councillor Vincent and elected members. Thanks for the question. So I want to be quite clear here. Currently, we don't have a district plan that's fit for purpose. We invested a lot of money in the spatial plan, and there's a community expectation that we use that in a timely way to bring our district plan up to speed. Coupled with that fact is the legislation being pushed through regarding the resource management reforms. Now, I remind everybody of that for the sole reason that that is why Council gave us direction to accelerate the district plan review. With that in mind, the staff have been working really, really hard here, actually, long hours to get this through. The district plan review is, given the state of our current one, we need to do a good job of this, and we are. And we've got national experts and consultants lined up and working for us at the moment to progress this mahi in the timeframe that you've directed us to. So we've engaged all those consultants and those experts. They're doing that work now, and we have only got 2 briefings to go before we put it out, the draft for feedback here. So I suppose in a roundabout way, what I'm saying is we're following your direction and we're well down the path now. The last point I'd like to make also is we're actually bringing funding forward. We're not spending additional funding. Sue's trying to find a way where we can lessen the blow on the general rate here, and that's what she talked to before. However, we're just bringing funding forward from a future year. I appreciate the impacts on the rates though. Kia ora.
Thank you for the explanations. Councillor Wethy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Graham, just on, and this is just me being a bit pedantic, I guess, but in your attachment A, prospective funding impact statement in the annual plan for 22-23, you've got total operating funding of 59,558,000. The following page, on page 7, you've got in the funding impact statement, total operating funding for the same period has now grown by 16,000 to 59,588. I think we should be making sure we do proper reconciliations so that the same figure is presented when it's describing the same function in the financial statements. Can we have a look at that? Because it does look very sloppy when it goes out in an annual plan to the public.
I will have a look. I'm just trying to see which number you're referring to. I will have a look at that.
Yeah, let's have a look at that.
I did do a
Maybe
reconciliation, but I will, confirm.
That was just an obvious one that I picked up on, but it's not something that's new to this year. We've had it in previous years as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor De Lavaris Woodcock, your hand is raised.
Yes, I'd like to contribute to the conversation, picking up from Councillor Vincent's point. So I disagree with Mr. Maris that because we've committed consultants to undertake work for the district plan, that we cannot disengage them. We have to put our ratepayers first and residents first and foremost, not our council staff, although I hear and acknowledge the work done to date. The district plan, if we take from surpluses or retained earnings to fund that, is still disappearing projects and levels of service that should have been that should be delivered. So that's just robbing Peter to pay Paul, and Peter is our residents, where we're going to miss out on things that we promised them under the long-term plan. And I also want to disagree with Jason Maris's, Mr. Maris, respectfully. Because I distinctly remember being the Mangawhai spatial plan, the number of submissions against didn't matter. This council adopted that against the majority of submitters that said they weren't happy with the intensification that was allowed for or set out in that spatial planning. So using the spatial plan as a justification to impose this huge cost on our ratepayers in this inflationary environment where everybody is just struggling to put food on the table and struggling to pay their insurances that are going up, their petrol costs, their everything. And so I just want to say I strongly push back against the annual plan forecast that we've got here with the 7% rates rise. Just immoral. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Delavaris Woodcock. Councillor Curnow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to chip in on this topic as well. I remind several of my elected members who've been here for this is the second term that the district plan was one of the very first decisions that we considered, the review of the district plan, and it was based purely on the frustrations of the communities that we represent in trying to deal with the district plan and the constraints that it has on both public and staff, the addition, which creates additional costs for people trying to engage with us. As a result, sort of by making that promise nearly 5 years ago or so, we have set an expectation. We've been promising this to our community, and they have been working alongside us to deliver this. We've also set expectations through the spatial planning process, and I went to most of those spatial planning meetings, as many as I possibly could, because I wanted to hear from the people who attended what did they actually think. Now, the level of interest and excitement in those meetings was high because they represented us listening to the community, us listening to what the communities wanted to get done, and actually doing something about it. Now, I am not interested in being a councillor or an elected member who listens and then does nothing. That is not what I'm here for. So we're well down the road with this project. In fact, in terms of that initial developing those main sections, we're 2 briefings away, as Mr. Maris pointed out, from having something that is something that we can put out to the community and say, we heard that you're frustrated, we've worked with you on the spatial planning, we've built something that is on that road, and now we want to hear from you about whether it actually does deliver on what you're looking for. So I think to throw our hands up at the moment and go, oh my goodness, we can't do this, when all we're doing is bringing forward costs from the future, I think it would be remiss, and it would disappoint the communities that we are supposed to represent. That is our duty, is actually to deliver for our communities. And this is what the officers have been trying to help us do. So I think it would be remiss of us at this point to go, oh, well, never mind, we'll leave it for now.
Thank you. Yeah, I've got a little statement as well. I think we've got an unprecedented number of private plan changes for large numbers of houses happening in Kaipara district because our district plan is so out of step. And how each of our council meetings recently, including just last week, there was another presentation in this space, and there's increasing demand out there in the community, and so it is part of a responsible council to be following through with its work that it's doing to create a simple and enabling district plan. Councillor Larson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think back to the direction that we gave on this district plan issue, and I remember it quite clearly, and it was at Mangawhai at the Domain, and I've gone on about this issue for some time in terms of getting rezoning, and was identified by council that we had a shortage of suitably zoned land in the residential in some areas. I think the main area was Dargaville for that, but also commercial and industrial shortages across the district really, and this was leading to some kind of ad hoc commercial and industrial development in the rural zone. And so we gave quite clear direction to staff that we wanted to push on with a plan change that dealt with these rezoning, and that we were going to focus on areas that were low-hanging fruit kind of things. We weren't going to take on rezoning in contentious areas where the landowner didn't want it, and it might result in us having resistance and greater chances of appeal. And the other thing that we directed staff to was, in that plan change, to also deal with any problems that were identified clearly with the current district plan, the operative district plan, and make changes to improve those areas. So that was the direction that we gave, and I supported that direction, and I still do. What I've seen come out of left field is a complete change, wherein we're going through, rather than a plan change which was anticipated to be put through quickly, so that we got it in place before the RMA reform legislation came through. What we've ended up is that's now become a comprehensive district plan review at great speed, and it wasn't something I ever contemplated either. I don't feel that we are heading towards a simple and enabling district plan at all. From what I've been seeing, it's becoming much more restrictive in a lot of ways, and I think we just need to have a look at where we're going with the process. As far as funding is concerned, look, you know, I kind of have to agree to some extent with the points that Councillor Delavaris is raising around the affordability of life in general for people at the moment, with the inflation that's kicking in, and job security, and lack of income and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think if we can find ways to make things easier for our constituents, then we should do. And maybe one of those things is not having a comprehensive accelerated process, and just have another look at that. But there's obviously not a time to be making a decision now. I just sort of wanted to chip in with my thoughts around that, as well as we sort of going around the room. So thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Larson. Look, I'd also like to remind you that one of the inputs, in addition to Council's own desires and wishes here, is all of the significant numbers of legislative changes that are being made here by central government, which have been identified repeatedly for us across many months, which are producing a new environment in which people are having to, or able to, respond in the community. And so we're trying to build a district plan that incorporates all of that, instead of our district plan being wildly out of step with what the government is producing and demanding of our communities. So I'd just like to remind elected members that that's part of the framework in which our district plan sits. We are not an island as a council here creating something on our own. We're entirely within a framework and a network that involves a whole heap of other people who are also elected as well, or not, as the case may be. Councillor Wethy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just my contribution on this district plan and the expenditure that it takes out of the annual plan. I guess I was first made aware how inadequate our existing district plan was within 6 months of being elected in 2016. At the Northland Field Days, we were hit up several times in the council tent by business owners and other people who were constrained in what they were able to do under the existing district plan. And it was acknowledged then that it was certainly inadequate in terms of the demands then. Since 2016-17, things have changed a lot. We have actually seen a completely different environment in terms of the potential to grow our district in terms of a ratepayer base, in terms of economic growth and activity, employment opportunities, a whole range of social benefits that would flow from any such growth. And one of the reasons that we're not able to take advantage of that is we haven't changed the restraints and restrictions in our existing district plan. And I would see that as one of our prime goals, is to get a district plan, as Councillor Larson's mentioned, which is open to growth and to be properly managed. Now, I just don't believe we should rush the district plan through just to get it through. We should get it right, because once we've got a new district plan approved, we've got to live with it. And currently we're living with an inadequate plan. We don't want to live with another inadequate plan. We want to get it right, and we also want to be able to take advantage of the opportunity we currently are sitting on. If we can take advantage of that with a new, easy to understand and simplified district plan, then all the things that Councillor De Olivares Woodcock has said about having a much greater rating base, being able to have a bigger rating stream to be able to do the levels of service we wish to do and which the community wants, will be able to become a reality. If we're constrained to a minimal rating base as we are at present, then it's going to be a long time before the community gets the sort of service that they're expecting from council. So I believe get it right. If it goes this term, fine. If it means we have to wait a bit longer into the new term to get it right, well, so be it. But all I can say is let's get it right this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson-Collins.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't want to be left out. Seems like everyone's chipping in on this piece. I don't think I've got very much more to add. I do absolutely want to acknowledge the ratepayers and the struggle that is out there. It is absolutely real. And I really do feel for people that are finding themselves on lower incomes and higher costs. It's not just rates that are going up, it's everything, and it is tough out there. But I also where I'm sitting is acknowledging as elected members, our job is to look forward and to look long term. And I think putting a halt on the district plan now, after already spending money on the process and staff resources, is a little bit short-sighted. And sometimes when times are good, you work well, and when times are tough, you need to work even better and harder and faster and stronger. And I think at this point in time, the complications that life is throwing at everybody, I think the value that we will get long term out of getting this district plan through will be better in the future than the rates increase that was already planned for and already voted on. And the staff have managed to get that increase pretty much back to what it was, I think is remarkable. And the staff have also explained that it may even decrease a little bit further. So I don't think the district plan is the place to play around with that at the moment. I think we need to carry on. And I agree with Councillor Wether, though, we do need to get it right. That is a challenge in itself. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson-Collins. So that was an interesting set of discussions regarding the district plan going around again, but interesting to get everyone's feedback as we're getting closer and closer into that. Of course, for those who are just watching us today for the first time, we had an entire briefing on the subject of Kaikoura District Council's district plan just a few weeks ago, and we've got another one coming up. So that's very important work that we're doing here in this district plan review space. Thank you. So elected members, are there further questions for clarification? We'll go back to Graham Coleman perhaps, is there anything further in your presentation you'd like to draw our attention to?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I think everything's pretty well clearly set out and where we're at the moment. I guess it's just a matter of waiting for us to complete the forecast, and I guess a matter of so we know where we're at, and then so we can give you options.
Okay, thank you. So, and in your presentation here, you've presented how those options are going to run over the next few months for us as we're headed towards June and the end of this financial year. So I think that's clear. And look, I'd just like to, in closing on this item, congratulate you and your team for working so hard to screw down the costs here. And whatever anyone says, you can say that as of the end of February, the start of March, we've whittled away and got this back to exactly the point that it was at a numerical level for this next year as what was consulted upon with the long-term plan. That's certainly true as of right now. And the next steps will be the next steps, but certainly I'd like to congratulate you and your team for the really solid work and input you're putting in here. And I'd also like to congratulate you on the use of the software and the extra new software that's working inside the accounting team, which is allowing us to see, if you like, further into the modelling of how rates may affect particular properties. 2 years ago, that was not possible at Kaipara District Council. There was no such tool for us to actually see how it directly impacted people or samples of people. And so we have that now, and that was only made possible by the good investments that the council has made in appropriate software at that time. So it's great to have the tools in the toolbox so that we have information at our hands as elected members, so that we are dealing with an evidence-based set of policies rather than simply things that we're making up or assumptions that we're hearing on, around the water cooler or on the grapevine. So here's to evidence-based policy. So thank you again, Graham, for the work you're doing here, and we're looking forward to the next version of this. And you never know, it may be a lower number still. So then I don't know at that point what the people in the community who've complained about the numbers being higher than in the LTP. I don't know what they'll say next, but I hope everyone's coming on the journey with us here as we're making Kaipara a better place. So thank you, Graham. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you.
Whānau, that brings us to the end of today's Kaipara District Council briefing. There are no further items on the agenda. So I'd like to thank everyone for your attendance and for participation today. I'd like to thank the members of the executive team. Everyone is working remotely now, and as the Omicron COVID cases across Kaipara are disproportionately high to the numbers of people in our community in comparison with the other two districts of Northland. That's the latest statistics from the Northland District Health Board. So our community out there is in real challenging times, and just wishing everyone safety and wellness as we go forward. So I'm just going to close now with a karakia. Thank you. Kia tau ngā manaakitanga a te mea ngaro, ki runga ki teina a tātou, kia mahia te hua makihikihi, kia toita kupu, toita mana, toita araha, toita rea Māori, ti hei Māori ora.